Whether you're new to watch collecting or you've been in it for a while, there are a lot of different things you should probably have as accessories or could have potentially if you're looking to just scratch the itch of trying something new within the hobby. And today we're going to cover 10 categories, kind of. A few of these are multiple objects within the category because I think there's too much to cover in just 10 specific objects, but we'll go over what that looks like. The first thing right out of the gate is a loupe. And I think this is incredibly valuable in a lot of different circumstances. There are certain times when I look around the house and I check to see if threads are cross-threaded on a bolt or on a nut. And a loupe is really beneficial to be able to see things right up close and get that extra ability to notice what's happening. Not to mention, I used this when I was looking at rings for my wife, when I was going out looking at diamonds. And funny thing, I was looking at a diamond at a jeweler and they weren't telling me some of the imperfections in the diamond. And I pulled out my loupe and I noticed them. It wasn't the best experience between the two of us, but that was one of the things that I was the jerk that was over-prepared with a loupe, and I think this is helpful in a lot of different circumstances, and that is one of them. The second thing is going to be any sort of strap/band, basically removal and installation, and that is going to be with a spring bar tool or spring bar pliers. Now, there are less expensive versions of spring bar pliers that are out there. These are the Bergen ones, the 7825s. And this spring bar tool is the Bergen 6767. Now I prefer these, but this is just my preference. These spring bar pliers were expensive. And I'm not gonna say that these are the best option for a lot of people. These are good for removing or adding bracelets where you wanna try and avoid scarring the lug at all. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll actually set one spring bar on one side and then they'll ramp the other bar in place. And when they do that ramping motion, they'll scratch the lug either with the spring bar tool or with the spring bar itself. And so these are supposed to limit that, but you can always add tape and then you don't have to worry about it. The less expensive versions though, I would steer away from. I found that they were really hard or really not good at holding on to the spring bar at all. These already struggle, but those always would slip. The spring bar would slip off. And so I would definitely, if you're going to get the pliers, go for the more expensive ones. Otherwise, a spring bar tool is perfectly fine. You also might want to look up replacement tips, especially for the pointed end one here, because you'll use this for a lot of different things. And so having replacements for the standard end here would be very beneficial. Number 3 is kind of the first main category, and that is any sort of band adjustment. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked from friends to adjust their bands for them. And the reason why is because I have the tools. And so I've done it for multiple people. The biggest thing you need to have are specific screwdriver sizes. You don't necessarily need the whole, set here of Bergen screwdrivers because some of these you're not going to use that often, if at all. I don't know that I've ever actually used the 2mm screwdriver or the 2.5mm screwdriver. They just kind of sit here. I like these of the Bergen screwdrivers. They have this octagonal head at the top and it's a composite bushing if I remember correctly. And these are just smoother than the alternative, which is basically looks more similar to this, but slightly different. You can also ask your jeweler for a screwdriver. In this instance, when I was at Moyer and I was buying my Speedmaster, I said, hey, can I get a screwdriver to size this band myself every so often, or any of my bands? And they gave this to me because they're not that expensive. And sometimes you have a nice jeweler that says, sure, here you go. And then they just threw this in the bag. And this has been actually my favorite 1.6mm screwdriver that I have, just because of the chamfer that's on it and the actual steel has stayed sharp for a very long time. So that is another quick tip. You can always ask your jeweler and they might give you something for free. But in terms of strap changing or band adjustment, really the big things you're gonna need are gonna be a screwdriver. I think a 1.6mm, a 1, and maybe a 1.4 are basically all you'll need for that. And I may not be entirely correct on all of those, but typically the 1.6 is what you're gonna see the most of. And then outside of that, the 1.4 is what I seem to find the most. On my bracelets, it seems to be the 1.6 or the 1.4 most of the time. That isn't to say that that is every bracelet out there. Yes, watch accessories are really important, but accessories that you use in your daily life are also important. And that's why this video is sponsored by Tiege Hanley. So Tiege Hanley is uncomplicated, basically skincare for men. And this seems like a weird topic for me to bring up because I don't wash my face every day or put sunscreen on every day or put eye serum on. That isn't something I did up until this, but I'm starting to get to the point where I can see my age. My wife is 5 years younger than me. And so I want to make sure that that gap between us is as little noticeable as possible as I get older. And taking care of your skin is a very important way to do that. I also have a lot of freckles, and so I can get a lot of moles. And I would prefer to not have skin cancer that goes unnoticed because I can't see them between the two. So to get away from the dark stuff, I love Tiege Hanley because it is very uncomplicated. I mean, this is their level 3 package. So you can see it's sent with all these different things, a scrub, a wash. You've got an AM and a PM, which they label on the actual bottle, which I love. So you don't have to remember. So the AM has sunscreen in it and the PM has a moisturizer. You also get a super serum for facial firmness, and you get eye care here for your eyes. And it's not necessarily just the packaging and how easy it is to use and the fact that it's gonna come to your door and replenish every month so I don't have to forget. And I also can get pressured when I accidentally get a month ahead. You know, I can get pressured to start using it more often, but you can choose how interested you want to be in the different tiers and how much work you want to do in the morning and late at night. But you can choose how much you want. Like I use the wash, the scrub, and the AM the most, and I use the PM probably at the end. I don't use the super serum in the eyes all that often, but every so often, you know, it could be something that you can kind of dabble into, but you can kind of choose what level you want within there. I actually saw these guys originally from a different channel, and I just really liked the product, and so I bought it before they even reached out to me. And then when they did, then obviously I was more than happy to have them sponsor this video. If you use the offer in the description below, you get 40% off your first box and a free gift. In my case, they gave me this scrubber, and you'll also get 20% off for the rest of your life. So if you're interested in TJ Hanley, look in the description below and give them a shot. There are bracelets that use a pin and collar system, and for those, you're gonna need a block, a hammer, and you're gonna have a pointed object that you're actually going to basically push through. Now there are the different adjustments where you can screw something and it slowly pushes the pin out. That is a safer way to do it, but I prefer to use the old nylon side of this hammer and a block, and that's because it just works every time. I've had those screw ones bend because the thing basically craters or caves up. And so because of that, I end up breaking those a lot. So I would definitely recommend the block and hammer method, but that's just preference. Also, as a quick note, if you're interested in accessories and watches in general, if you own or want to buy a 3D printer and want to feel, you know, and kind of experience what that is, you can get a lot of these different plastic tools with a 3D printer. You can get the handle for a spring bar tool. You can print this block right here. Actually, I printed on my 3D printer, and this one I bought, and I tend to prefer this one because it has the slots built in at the same level. It's a preference thing, but that is one of the things that you can find. If you have a 3D printer, you can get a lot of these different tools. Number 4 is going to be watch storage. Now there's watch rolls, which look like this. Obviously, you can use a watch roll if you want. You can use another also kind of called a watch roll because it's rolly. This is for 3 watches. This one's for 4 watches. You know, there's different ways that you can store your watches. I prefer to have a case, and I've had this case for several years now. This is actually a Wolf case. I bought it on Amazon warehouse deals. So it doesn't have a lock that works, but I figured if someone wanted to steal these, they were just gonna take the whole box with them anyway. So the lock didn't really do much, but it has this tray underneath, which I really like because I store a lot of my bracelets that I'm not using at the moment and my rings and some of my other stuff down there. So watch box, watch storage. I have basically 2 things that are important to me, a watch box, and then I have another single watch roll, which when I'm traveling, I'll take 1 additional watch with me sometimes, and then that's where I store that. Number 5 is gonna be straps. Now there's a lot of different straps, and so I'm actually gonna do another video later on, so if you're interested in that, please subscribe. But I'm gonna be doing a video on watch straps, basically all of my favorites. And this right now is one of the ones that I wear a lot of. I have it in the box because when I'm not wearing it, I put it back in the box. This is from REM Straps, and I'm giving them a shout out ahead of the video that I'm gonna do, talking about some of my favorites. And that's because they make really cool designs. So these are the Moonwatch DNA is what he calls this strap. These are custom straps where basically they're laser etching a design onto what would otherwise be a standard strap. So you can obviously see the quote there, you can see the boot there, and obviously the texture is supposed to be that of the moon. I think this is just so cool. Like it's just a different thing that you wouldn't otherwise see. It's unique. I think it definitely adds a little bit more interest to what otherwise would be just a black leather strap. And that's what I love. You know, this hobby can have these different avenues of things that you find out. And straps are one avenue where it's almost inexhaustive, the number of companies that are out there that do different straps, whether it's leather or fabric, NATO straps, canvas straps. You also have all your rubbers. You have deployant clasps or non-deployant clasps. You have sailcloth straps. So there's a whole list of those, and that's why I'm gonna be doing a whole in-depth view of all the different straps and some of my favorites and different companies within that category. All right, so number 6, and this is a little niche, but I would say a micrometer. Now, a micrometer is really helpful because you're really gonna need to know the measurements of really small things. Watches are really small, and you don't necessarily need a micrometer just for watchmaking, but also even just for spring bars. If you've ever had a Seiko watch, you would know that the spring bars on those are really fat in the middle and really narrow on the ends. And so it's important when you're building out your roster or your stock or inventory of different 20mm spring bars, because you're gonna use them all the time and you're gonna lose them on accident because they're gonna fly across the room. You're gonna need to know what you like. Do you like double collar or single collar? And then what exactly is the head width or dimension, diameter there, and then what is the diameter of the middle of the spring bar, because they fit differently depending. Some bracelets are milled out for a wider or a narrower spring bar, and some have a wider or narrower head or hole drilled in the side of the watch. And so you need to know what those dimensions are in order to make sure that you're using the correct spring bar for the watch so it's as secure as possible. A micrometer is the best way to do that. They're really inexpensive. You can look in the description below for all of these things, but micrometers are really cheap, and I think they're really useful in this hobby, so I definitely would have one. Number 7 is gonna be any sort of refinishing thing. Now, everyone talks about polywatch. If you don't own a plastic or acrylic crystal watch, meaning Hesalite or any old vintage watch before sapphire, then you're gonna want polywatch because it's gonna get scratched. But you also have other options in terms of refinishing. I have used Flitz before. I have a video on it where I use that on my Rolex Explorer just to brighten it up a little bit. I know that Cape Cod is a method that a lot of people use. I have a whole set over there of Cape Cod, which smells very good, but I haven't used it all that often because I feel like it takes a whole lot of metal off. But Cape Cod is another method. And then I also have here, this is a sand eraser, or basically an ink eraser. There are also fiberglass pens that you can use. I have a video on me refinishing my Tudor Pelagos 39 that I used to have and still miss every so often. But you can find any sort of refinishing things are out there, and they're all kind of fit for whatever you're interested in, how much metal you want to take off, and what your watch is made of. So refinishing tools are very helpful. These are just the ones that I use and what I recommend. Number 8 is going to be calipers, and that's not really uncomplicated. Now, I would get plastic calipers so that you don't scratch the watch as much as possible. The problem is going to be the cheaper you go on the calipers, the less precise they'll be, so you can't really use these for spring bars. So that's why you need the micrometer, but these are really helpful just to figure out what sizes you like. I use these in the early days on every single watch that I wore or tried on, and that's because it gave me an idea of, I like this diameter, I like this thickness, you know, I'm used to this lug to lug measurement, and you can see them on our videos, but not every watch is reviewed, and so you don't always have those measurements. So it's very helpful for you to get an idea and a feel for what you like and what you don't like, especially in the early days, and this is the best way to do that. So I would say any sort of digital caliper is the best way to do it. You can do the manual calipers also. I'm just lazy, and so I like the digital ones. Number 9 would be any sort of Timegrapher. Now, I have a Timegrapher over there where I use that to check the health of my watches, but you also can buy Timegraphers on your phone. There are different apps where you can put the microphone up to the watch and get a good-ish indication of exactly how well the watch is running. All the Timegrapher is a highly sensitive microphone that's built in to the actual machine. And so there isn't really that much complicated to the Timegraphers. Those are $100. You can buy Timegraphers online on the App Store, and I'll show you a couple here. There are different methods and people get varying results. So it's hard for me to recommend a specific company, but Watch Accuracy Meter is one that is free. You can get at least an idea of if you like it or if you don't from the fact that it's free, but there are $30 ones. There are other more expensive ones as well. Now, I prefer the Timegrapher. I think it's worth the money to at least buy one and set it on the shelf rather than a $30 app. But I'm also someone who likes physical goods over, a virtual app because that physical Timegrapher is never going to die. So if you've made it this far, you're in the deep end, you're really interested in watches. Number 10 is going to be watchmaking tools. And the first big ones that I use all the time, and this is just for not even just modding, but also strap changes, I use this pad all the time. This is a Bergen 539575. The 75 at the end there is the diameter of the pad. I like a 75 millimeter pad because it's wide, it's big, I can fit any watch on it and I don't really have any issues. But anytime I'm taking the back off, I have to lay the watch face down. You don't want to lay it on a hard surface. I've done that on a vintage watch and cracked the crystal. So you want to lay everything on a soft surface like this or a padded surface that can absorb some shock. Lay the watch down and then you can take the case back off. This is where a rubber ball comes in handy. This is Bergen 8008. You can tell all Bergen stuff has numbers on it. So this is really good for obviously taking case backs off. It's way better than you'd expect on almost all cases, but obviously it doesn't get all of them. So you can always find out if you need something beyond that. Again, you can 3D print or buy watch movement holders. And also you're definitely gonna want to have, if you're doing any regulation, because that's the first thing most people dabble in, you're gonna want something like this. This is a Bergen 7010. And this is basically just a pointer. Now you can also just buy pegwood here and shave it down into the same shape as this, but I use this all the time, especially for regulation on like Seikos where you're touching that small lever, or if I'm doing any poking or prodding and I want to avoid scratching the watch in any way, this is the best way to do it. Also for light cleaning. These are very good for light cleaning, pegwood or this. All watchmakers use pegwood to clean out all the dirt and grime and grit that's on the watch. So I would definitely buy a set of pegwood. They're really cheap and they're helpful to have around in case you want to clean or in case you need to poke or prod something. Then the last thing would just be tweezers within the same number 10 watchmaking tools. Tweezers are very helpful. Realistically, you only need one set of tweezers right now. I have several. Dumont is a great brand, but also Bergen tweezers are great, but each tweezer is usually about 25 to 35 bucks. So you don't need all of them. So I use this one the most. This is the Bergen 70242. I use this for basically everything. All the other tweezers kind of are just backups nowadays, now that I'm not actually doing that much servicing or any servicing really at all. This Dumont is also really nice here. This is the 03. The numbers have to do with basically how the tweezer is styled and how it's used and what it's supposed to be used for, how thick the head is, whether it's for hairsprings or for general maintenance. But as I said, this Bergen one is perfectly fine. You can use this for basically everything, good holding capacity, and really well made. The one thing you're gonna have to know on tweezers if you're gonna use them a lot is you're gonna have to sharpen them. So figure out what your sharpening method is now before you start bending them on accident. But tweezers, very helpful. So those are my watch accessories and kind of what I would recommend to someone who's interested in the hobby or getting into the hobby or has been in the hobby for a little while. Again, ask people for free things. They'll give them to you every so often. But what do you guys think? What's a watch accessory I didn't mention here that's really important to you? Please leave them in the comments below. Help each other out. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.